Twilight Heart. Chapter 1. The Beginning of an Adventure. The skies over Pastoria were as bright as day over the looming marsh, usually covered with fog. The town was never really active, but was bustling with trainers and tourists who had come to enter the marsh. A swift, aqua-colored blur drove through the crowd and out into the route ahead. Aurora Fellas, a young 14-year-old girl who had just started a Pokemon journey 3 months ago from Canalave City. She was raised by a family of sailors who made a living by catching and selling off their catches to the local markets around Sinnoh. She had left for Twin Leaf Town one day and came back with her new best friend, Shinx. Now she began her journey to become the greatest Pokemon master she could. Why, just recently, she had conquered her first gym battle against the mighty Crasher Awake and earned herself a Fen badge. Now was off to Veilstone City, but first a trip to her grandmother's house. Why gym battles? Well, she always loved contests, but felt battles were more her style, as she always loved to test herself with everything she could. People would sometimes say she was in over her head most of the time, usually with studying or training. She pedaled, riding her bike through the thick muck, covering the wetlands, and through the tall stalks of grass. Her golden hair danced in the wind behind her, along with the white beret, tied with a cerulean bow that rested upon it. A white sleeveless dress she wore was tied with a small blue ribbon topped over a simple blue undershirt, and came down to her hips, which remained bare to her knee-high white socks and brown leather shoes. A look of determination in her amber eyes, she sped off toward the lake. "We'll be off to Veilstone City soon enough, Shinx." She smiled at the little blue cat Pokemon sitting in the basket in front of her, who gave a happy trill. She focused her attention back onto the road and pedaled onward through to the lakefront. A few minutes later, and they arrived at the Valor Lakefront, where her grandmother lived. She parked the bike as the little Shinx slipped out and landed in her arms. She smiled and patted its head and knocked on the door. "Grandmother, it's me, Aurora," she called through, hearing muffled sounds from the inside. An old woman opened the door and greeted her. "Hello, Aurora. What brings you all the way out here? Have you started a journey?" she asked, leaning on an old wooden cane for support. Aurora smiled and nodded. "Yes, I went to see Professor Rowan 3 months ago, and look!" she exclaimed, fiddling with her jacket pocket as she pulled out a small gold case and opened it, showing a single badge inside, the Fen badge she had just received from Pastoria's gym a few days ago. "A quick learner, just like your mother," her grandmother chuckled. "Oh, before I forget," she reached into her backpack and pulled out a small parcel for her grandmother. "Professor Rosen said he wanted me to deliver this to you," she said as she handed it over. "Oh, from Rowan?" she asked as she opened the letter. She glanced at the writing and smiled. "All right, thank you, Aurora. You should probably get going soon. You don't want to get to Veilstone late now, do you?" she winked. "Gah! I totally forgot," she said as she grabbed her stuff, kissed her grandmother goodbye, and sped off with Shinx to the north. As she rode on, the area became very foggy and unclear. Eventually, she couldn't see anything, and got off her bicycle and decided to look for a way out. "Shinx, can you see anything?" she asked the Pokemon beside her, but it shook its head, and the two pressed onward. The forest remained shrouded by the white blanket which blinded them, straying them from their intended path. She walked forward until she felt the ground beneath her give way. She had stepped too far, and off the ledge, and tumbled down into the darkness. She screamed for help as she fell, and next a huge splash into the water below. She raised her head from the lake, and looked around, shivering cold and wet, and climbed out, the sides soaked. "Ah, no, my bike!" she cried as she watched the turquoise bicycle sink below the murky water. She sighed, and stood up and frowned and looked down at Shinx, who in turn was also soaked. "Well, at least we were okay," she sighed. "Well, at least the bicycle didn't get zapped by a certain someone's thunderbolt. Mario, shut it! We're trying to listen to the story here!" She sat down on the grass with her Pokemon and closed her eyes, remembering how warm it was back home, and eating food. She hadn't eaten in months since her journey first began. She envisioned it all, and began to hum a lullaby-like tune her mother taught her. As she hummed, her voice echoed through the frozen forest, and through the clouds of dense mist. She felt safe. Whenever she was upset or alone, she always hummed this very tune. But soon enough, a loud, peculiar sound broke the humming and buzzed through the spring. Her eyes shot open as she watched a purple glow in the distance that quickly dissipated. She ran towards the glow and gasped. Laying before her was a young boy with black hair, similar to her age, lying unconscious. She looked around to see if anyone else was in view. "Hello? Hello? Is anyone there?" Her voice echoed in the empty spring. Giving up on searching for help, she turned back to the young boy on the grass, and knelt down to him, and put a hand on his forehead. It was still warm, which was a good sign. She gave a slight murmur as she put a hand on his chest. She gasped and pulled her hand back when she heard a groan coming from the boy. Slowly his ruby eyes opened, and he took a glimpse at the world before him. The boy looked around in confusion, and then at his body and stood up, examining every aspect about himself. "What is this? What is this form? Where am I?" he questioned himself, wondering answers. Aurora stood not too far away, but the boy hadn't seen her as he was too focused on himself, which Aurora found slightly creepy, but more weird. "Excuse me," she stuttered in shyness. The boy turned around and noticed Aurora behind him. His black locks draped over his left eye and glared at the female before him. "Who are you? What do you seek of me, girl?" he replied. Aurora frowned. "I have a name, you know," she huffed with her hands at her sides. The boy turned away and closed his eyes. "Did I ask for your name? I asked where I am. Now tell me," he scowled. This only fueled Aurora's anger. "You could be a little nicer, you know, and I don't know where we are either, okay?" she yelled, then covered her mouth, realizing how loud she screamed. "Sorry," she said in embarrassment. "I didn't get that out of hand. So, anyways, I'm Aurora. What's your name?" she asked in a sweet tone. The boy looked down. "My name?" he mumbled to himself. "What is my name? Who am I?" he asked her. Aurora stared at him blankly. "You don't know who you are?" she asked, a little concerned. The boy nodded. "I don't recall anything." Aurora looked behind her to see her Shinx dashing up to her side, calling her. "Well," she started. "What about Zone?" she asked. The boy frowned and fixed his gaze to the girl before him. "Zone," he muttered under his breath. A silent pause filled the air around the lake. "I suppose," he said hoarsely. Aurora wasn't sure if she should be happy the stranger was talking to her, or frightened by his rather ghastly-looking appearance. His short black hair spiked to one side and draped over his right eye. He wore a silver jacket over an ink-black t-shirt, under which were dark gray cargo pants with several pockets, and a gold chain hanging out of the left side and trailing down his flare-cut pant legs. On his hands were gold hand-cut gloves that cut off at the wrists, leaving the flesh fingers visible. A dark aura seemed to envelop his entire body as he stood in thought. "You said your name was Aurora?" he asked with his arms folded across his chest. Yes," she replied. The boy held out his hand. "Then thank you, Aurora." Aurora looked at the hand before her and slightly jerked back. You're welcome?" she asked, trying to hide her confusion. "Farewell, then," he replied, as he began to walk off and disappeared in the fog. Wait!" Aurora tried to call, but he had already disappeared into the thick white mist. She sighed and looked down at Shinx. "Well, we'd better get going, then. Who was that boy? Why did he seem so different? But why? So, who is this mysterious boy that Aurora now calls Zone? Where is he going off to? And just how is Aurora gonna get out of this foggy forest? These questions will be answered in the next chapter. Chapter 2! Surprise Attack! Oh shit, that doesn't sound good at all! Oh no!